Hello everyone, today I'll be telling you guys how to sail in Windward. So if you never played any games like Trade Lands, Sea of Thieves, or Battle Sails, then this video is for you. And if you have, this video is still for you because this game sailing mechanic is quite different and it might take some getting used to. So this video is specifically made for my crew, the 9 Dragons. But if you guys shared this video, please feel free to join our crew. Anyway, let's get started. Now let's first get used to our controls. So bottom right corner you can see a lot of stuff. So you got your compass, the weather, the speed your ship is going at, the bearing, the heel, and the wind, as well as where your ship rudder is located. So currently you can see that the wind is the arrow. The wind is blowing from northwest to southeast, so we're directly downwind and we are not moving and we have no sails up, but we are slowly being pushed backwards. So our speed is around negative 0.1 or 0, and our rudder is centered, so it is in the middle. As you can see, if I move my rudder, if I push D, it will go right, and if I hold A, it will go left. And this is available to everyone on your crew, so they will see where the rudder is as well. And most importantly, you will be looking at the server wind speed and as well as the wind direction. So personally, I do not like my compass moving around, so I turned off ship compass rotation with camera, because this just messes me up a bit. So I like to turn that off so I know for sure what direction I'm going to be looking at the compass at all times. Now let's talk about server wind and why it's important. So server wind is the overall wind speed of the server. So currently this server has a wind speed of 20.6 knots. Ideally, you want to be sailing with winds up or upwards to 25 knots, which means you'll be able to reach max speed very easily with your ships if you're going directly downwind. Now I'll show you a difference between 25, 26 knot winds versus 7 knot winds, and how big differences it makes in sailing speed. As you can see, the wind in the server is 7 knots, and even though we're going perfectly at an angle for the alert, we're only sailing at 2.9 knots. So now let's see what happens if we sail in winds upwards to 26 knots. As you can see, the server wind speed is 25.5 knots, and the ship is now sailing at 10.7, 10.6 knot speeds. That is going crosswind. The reason why it's going crosswind also is because the alert is a crosswind ship. So now let's talk about different types of sails in this game. There are 3 main types of sails you usually see in this game, and that is the jib, spanker, and the square sail. So there's a very common rule to remember by when it comes to jibs and spanker. The jibs will always turn you with the wind. So as you can see, the wind is blowing from north to south. If I activate my jibs, even without moving my rudder, I will start turning left because the wind is blowing from my right to my left. So now let's set my jibs and demonstrate. The reason why you want to do this at all is because you want the ship to turn at a hard angle sometimes, and this will help you execute those really hard turns. So as you can see, now the ship is turning left because the wind is blowing this direction. And that's why sometimes when the ship is turning by itself, that's because you didn't set another sail to balance off the jibs. So now let's talk about the other one, the spanker. So as you remember, the jib pushes you with the wind. So just now the wind was going from our right to left. It still is, just at a very slight angle now. So if I set my spanker, what happens is that a ship will turn opposite of the wind. So when I set my spanker right now, the ship would turn from left to right. So it would turn right because the wind is blowing from our right to left. So the opposite of that will be turning right. So if I set the spanker, the ship will start turning right. Although it's quite slow because the wind is at a very tight angle right now. You can see that the bearing is changing and our ship is very slowly turning right, as you can see from the compass. Once again, you do this to execute tighter turns or by getting out of being in a stuck situation. So sometimes when you sail your ship, and you activate the spanker or jibs first, you realize that you're turning without actually helming. And that's because the jib and the spanker needs to be both activated together to counteract this. So I'll demonstrate. As you can see, the ship is now turning right because the wind is rotating to the left, so that's pushing us against the wind. So now if I activate my jibs, it will balance each other out. So if I activate my jibs now, the ship will now sail directly forward. As you can see, no longer turning. The bearing is not moving at all. It is now straightened itself out. So remember, jib pushes you with the wind. Spanker pushes you opposite of the wind. Now let's talk about the final sail, the square sail. And this is best demonstrated on bigger ships because the Alert has a very small square sail that doesn't really matter because all it does is control speed. So remember, square sails control speed. Now let's talk about how you can use square sails to turn on larger ships, such as the Ontario. Now we're talking about ships that have 2 masts and more square sails. As you see, the Alert only had one spanker, 3 jibs, and 1 tiny square sail. The Ontario, in fact, has a full set of mainsails or square sails, and is a 2-mast ship with jibs and spanker. So what's special about square sail ships or 2-mast or 3-mast ships is that the square sails or the masts themselves can be pulled or braced in certain directions to make it move, and usually your captain or your officer would tell you which one to brace or pull, or use certain terminologies that you will need to understand. So I will tell Megapigs over here to pull my sails in a bit, but let's first look at the sails. As you can see, currently the sails are neutral, so we call this shiver. So when someone says shiver my sails, neutral, out of the wind, this is what they mean. The sails are out of the wind, they're neutral to the wind, so they're just not moved at all. Now if I tell Megapigs to trim my sails or go with the wind, he will pull the sail on the direction of which the wind is blowing. So as you can see, he is now pulling my front sail, my foresail, and my mainsail to the right. He's bracing right because the wind is blowing from left to right, so we'll brace right in this case. So just remember, when the terminologies trim the sails, go with the wind, it means that they want you to put the sails into the wind, which is what he did just now. Sometimes they may also just say brace right, so just go to the right hand side of the sails and pull on it till it braces all the way to the right. Alright, now let's say I want to be out of the wind, or I want to go against the wind. So I will tell Megapigs, I want you to A4 my sails, I want you to go against the wind. So he will pull my sails hard left now to go against the wind. As you can see, when the sails are catching wind, they fluff up, and when they're against the wind, they become flat because the wind is pushing against it. So now you see how the speed changed from 7 knots to 3 knots is because now we're out of the wind. Sometimes you will hear a lot of different terms, but it's quite easy to understand, and some people might just use simple terms such as brace and into the wind, out of the wind, and neutral to the wind. These are all terms that you can hear. And now let's talk about something else known as battle sails. So when battle sails happen, basically what happens is that we want to maintain a neutral speed. So that's something that you might hear as well. So when we say neutral or battle sails, it just means we want the sails to slow us down but not too slow. And you might even hear the captain or the officer to tell you to set or strike some sails. So sometimes they might tell you to strike my main sails up top. So if I tell Megapigs, please strike my main sails, then he will strike the top of my main sails and probably the second one as well, so that we maintain a certain speed to pull off certain maneuvers while not being totally demasked. But just understand that your role as a sailor in a bigger ship is to just listen to the officer and listen to the orders they give you depending on which sail to pull or set. As you learned previously, square sails, jibs, and spankers are the 3 types of sails that you see most. And the different orders are brace, left or right, into the wind, that means trim, neutral, that means shiver, or against the wind, that means A4 or A back. These are terms that you will hear commonly used when sailing. Now I would like to talk about studding sails. Now let's talk about the final part of basic sailing. that you often need to do. It is called wind catchers or studding sails. So as I mentioned earlier, the server wind speed determines how fast a ship can go, and some ships have the ability to extend their sails to take advantage of low winds to be able to go faster than normal. So one of the ships that do have studding sails are the Ontarios. So Megapix will now set my sails. There are a few conditions for when studding sails can be activated. First of all, the overall server wind speed must be under 12.5 knots. Okay, it must be under 12.5 knots. And your overall ship speed cannot exceed 5.7 knots. So currently, we are going about 1.3 knots. Oh, we might hit 2 knots soon. But our wind speed is still 10 knots, so we're incredibly slow. Now, when the captain says wind catchers or studding sails, Megapix will now set our studding sails. So studding sails are sails that you extend on top of your main sails that gives it an extra boost in catching wind. So it makes it even larger. But this sail is specifically used for low wind situations. If the wind is any faster or the ship goes any faster, they will start to tear really quickly. You can see now that we're gonna catch upwards of 3.5 knots of wind compared to the 2 that we had earlier. So studding sails is just to make it so that you go faster during low wind conditions. Now that we're at the end of the video, there's probably some stuff I did miss, such as like how to go downwind the fastest with what different sail types and stuff. But I just wanted to give you the basics down so that you can sail the alert, as well as be functional in a crew when the orders are given for you to brace or trim sails. That's the main idea of this video. So yeah, that's it guys. Have fun playing Windward, and